It's the end of week one of Time Team's bucket list dig of one of the most important archaeological sites in the whole of the UK, Sutton Hoo. The field we're exploring is a short walk from the famous royal burial ground. This was where the vast Anglo-Saxon warrior king's grave was discovered in 1939. Over the years, the site's revealed archaeology from Neolithic right through to the 18th century, including a number of early Anglo-Saxon burials under the Visitors Centre, just next to where we're digging. So we're hoping to find out how big this cemetery was, but also to find out why a piece of Iron Age farmland should have been chosen as the burial ground for Anglo-Saxon royalty. Welcome to Time Team Live at Sutton Hoo. That is a sentence I never ever thought I'd say in the whole of my life. It really is an exceptionally exciting site, isn't it? It
is, and it's just so amazing for me to have you all here.
Because you've been associated with this dig for, I was going to say forever, but that's not very flattering, is it? You know what I mean.
Since I was 20, yes, it's most of my life now.
But the first dig here was before the war.
Certainly before time, yes. The first excavation that we know about was in 1938 with Basil Brown's first year, and that was the year before he found the intact ship burial down here in Mound 1 in the Mound Cemetery.
Yeah.
Now, that was that was finished and put in storage over the wartime years, and then they began to write it up. Then in the 1960s, they realised, while writing it up, that they didn't know everything that they needed to know to finish the book. So in the 1960s, they came back, they looked underneath the mound, and finished the book. And then people started saying, but this book does not cover everything. And then in the 1980s,
ta-da!
Yes, Martin Carver won a design competition to do a new excavation at Sutton Hoo, and he welcomed undergraduates, and I was one of them.
Presumably, each time people came back to it, archaeological methodology had improved, so there was more possibility of more information coming in.
Yes, and that was a deliberate act of the 1980s excavation. It was a laboratory for new techniques. So we tried out geophysics, which didn't work very well. We tried out ground-penetrating radar, one of the earliest examples of that. That didn't work very well either. But we had a go. You know, we threw everything at it. And by the time we finished, the site was so well known that it was acquired by the National Trust, brought into public display, and then we needed a visitor centre.
And?
Yes, well, you have to dig foundations for a visitor centre.
Yeah, so this is what, about around 2000, something like that?
Yes, around 2000. Yeah. And here is the visitor centre on our map. Now, digging the foundations for that, of course, you have to have an archaeological excavation beforehand.
Yeah.
And so there was an archaeological excavation that found a whole Anglo-Saxon cemetery with at least 30 people buried there. And what was really interesting was that not only was it people of a more middling sort than the Mound Cemetery, the royal burial ground, it was also very slightly earlier. So it was mid to late 6th century. So it stopped in about 580, exactly when the Mound Cemetery starts going. So it really looked like it was a precursor.
So, just to recap, this is where the fantastic boat burial was found in the 30s. Then, when there was sufficient interest, the visitor centre here with the cemetery underneath was excavated. And now, where we are here, well, that's where we're digging. This little golf ball is right where we're standing now.
Yeah.
Jackie, you are pretty familiar with a lot of the finds that we've uncovered here, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I worked on the cremated remains from the Visitor Centre excavation. I have to confess to my embarrassment, I've never actually been to Sutton Hoo before, so this is brilliant for me to come here. So I looked at the cremation burials. There were inhumation burials there as well, but because of the soil, the nature of the soil here, all that remained from them, apart from the artefacts that came out, was the smile. So we didn't get an awful lot of information about the human remains, but the cremated remains were in really quite good condition. So we had some of them were made in urns, some of the burials made in urns, some weren't. Some of them had pyre debris in the backfill, which means the cremations were actually undertaken near to where the burials were made. So as well as having the human bone, we know what artefacts were put on the pyre with them. It's called a pyre good, so you get quite a lot of animal bone. I think there were bronze items came up, glass beads, some of them, stone beads. So we got a good idea of what went on the pyre with those individuals.
So now where we are here, hoping that we might find some more of the Anglo-Saxon cemetery. We've got all that information from the previous digs, but of course we've got the geophys, which we had done a few weeks ago.
Yes, there's been various amounts of geophysics over the years, always getting better and better. And of course the Rolls Royce is John Gator, and he has come and done a whole heap to try to get an advanced sneak preview as to what might be here. And we've known for years, from field walking and geophysics and metal detecting, etc., that there's prehistoric activity on this field. There is even a little bit of Roman activity, and there is the Anglo-Saxon edge of the cemetery coming into this field. But really what we're left with at the moment is a lot of blobs in this area, which John says could be graves, but they could also be, alternatively, be pits or even something natural like a tree throw, because the sandy soil here doesn't support the weight of a tree very well. It's it's a bit crumbly, and so at times like the 1987 hurricane, that knocked over a lot of trees, and what happens is the roots bring up a whole lot of subsoil, and it's very brightly coloured and very obvious, and either those pits can attract finds because they're open pits, or possibly they could attract a kind of ritual deposition with Neolithic people putting in, we have found this with burnt flint and Neolithic pottery. And in the Neolithic, it seems that people are maybe visiting, maybe not exactly living here, but what we've got to do is to look at these things, ground truth them, and find out exactly what they are.
Jackie, you said in quite a blasé way just now, they could be inhumations or they could be cremations. Can I tease out of you a bit what you mean about those two things and what we might be likely to find?
Right. Well, the term inhumation just basically means inhuming, putting something in the ground. So technically speaking, it could refer to either cremated bone or unburnt bone. But we tend to refer to inhumation burials as the burial of an unburnt corpse. As I said, unfortunately, in this case here, that we don't expect to find much bone surviving. We might get some tooth crowns if we're lucky, but obviously we might get the artefacts that they were buried with. With the cremated bone, like I said, you could either get urn burials, so they would be put inside a ceramic vessel, and I think in one case we did also have a bronze vessel that was used, although I suspect the bone was actually in a bag when it went into that vessel. And then the unurned ones, as we refer to them, probably just went in either a bag of textile or skin or leather or something like that. But they were still formal burials that were made.
It's so tantalising from our point of view that we have got all this information like behind us. We're all poised to get new stuff. We're looking in the ground now and it's all a bit of a jumble and the geophys doesn't quite tell us what we want to know. In addition to that, and this I find particularly thwarting, we have chosen to excavate not in a lovely, flat, beautiful part of the field that nobody's ever touched before, but just by a big ditch that somebody dug 30 or 40 years ago in order to put a service trench in. Why?
Well, that is absolutely deliberate. And in fact, if you look at any excavation at Sutton Hoo, it always begins by emptying something that's already there. In the 1980s, we began by emptying one of Basil Brown's backfilled graves in Mound 2. So we got this sneak preview down into the bowels of the cemetery. And if we empty this service trench, we get the same thing. We get a sneak preview into the section, into the vertical stratigraphy of the field. So we can look at it in a kind of safe way almost. Okay, the backfill has come from disturbed archaeology, but we don't need to treat that with such incredible reverence. It's already been mixed and jumbled. And when we take that out, we can see if there's a buried soil. We can see if there is the edge of a grave. We can see how deep things are. If there's a grave, how deep is it? How much soil have we lost? Because this sandy soil, blows about, it blows away and it blows back. You can lose up to half a metre in a few windy decades. So we get this sneak preview so we know what to expect. So our excavation afterwards is much more precise.
And anything that it's gone through, artefacts or any bone will go into the backfill of that trench. So it's not just what it looks like in the section. We may get an idea of what kind of things we're going to find.
I suppose the point that we should be making is that respect for this site, that it was dug in the late 30s, then not again till the 60s, then not again till the 80s, not again till the turn of the century. It's not that people just came in with spades and shovels in between that. There's always been that respect for the site, which we are perpetuating by digging in such a discrete area. So
yes, absolutely. I mean, as soon as the land came into the possession of the National Trust, a research plan was made, not in order to do it immediately, but just to say that if we ever do some research, this is our priority and that is our priority. And Gardenfield has always been in that research plan. There was just no way of doing it until Time Team could give us a hand, really.
Yeah, because we knew that cemetery was going to extend to the west. We could see where it stopped when they did the visitor centre, that it was going to extend to the west.
But we're going to prove it or not.
Yes, hopefully we'll find the edge. Yeah. So we didn't find the edge under the visitor centre. How far does it come out? And is it bounded? What does the edge mean? Because the really tantalising thing, date-wise, about the cemetery here is that it stops in around 580 AD, which is just at the moment that the Mound Cemetery gets going. So chronologically, one seems to transform into the other. But in terms of richness, this has got some riches, some unusual burials, but it's nothing compared to what's going on down at the Mound Cemetery, which is absolutely extraordinary on an international scale.
I suppose what everybody who's watching this programme is going to be thinking is, why are these three people theorising and positing? Why can't we have a look at some archaeology? So if you'll excuse me for a few minutes, I'm going to take you out to where Matt is actually working at the coal face, as it were, of this dig. Lovely tent, as you can see. Not only have we got a lovely tent, but we've got lovely people. Hello, everybody. These people, you didn't know, did you know this was happening? Oh, you heard word of it this week. But apart from these people, who will I chat to later? Here is Matt. Hello.
How are you doing?
Mate. Very well, very well. Tell me about what you've been doing, because you've actually been the one who's been doing the excavating, although I have to say, it's not a very deep trench, is it?
Not at the moment, Tony. And we have been here a while, and it's been quite slow, and in some ways quite painstaking, because we have been taking off the topsoil layer by layer, really carefully. We break it up, we wet it down, we metal detect it, and we get a 3D point on every single find, that much at a time, and then we do the whole thing again.
Look, you don't need a presenter. You're perfectly capable of doing this yourself. Tell them.
Okay, so as I was just saying to Tony, we've getting down through the topsoil. We're nearly there now. It's about that deep, and it is starting to pay dividends, this really, really careful recording system that we've got. You can see the bottom of the modern plough marks in cutting through the yellow sand over there, and in the corner of the trench in the topsoil, we had some pottery, and now in that area, we've got a bit of charcoal, we've got what looks like Anglo-Saxon pottery, and we've got some burnt bone. All the components for a cremation. So I think we're getting the beginning of our Anglo-Saxon cemetery, but there's still plenty to be going on with. We've got to get out the rest of that loose there. That'll take a while. And then we're going to go through the whole process again. We're going to break up the soil. We're going to spray it. We're going to metal detect it. We're going to field walk. We're going to get a 3D location on every single find. And then we'll scrape off all the loose, hopefully starting to reveal some archaeological features. And we've already been here a week. We've got 3 weeks left. Now that might sound like quite a long time, but I think there's plenty to be getting on with.
Thank you, Matt. I love it when Matt does that kind of thing. I remember when Matt did his very first excavation on Time Team. Matt, when did you first turn up on Time Team?
Just over 20 years ago, I think it was.
20 years ago, and he was a callow youth, as they say. And now he is not only an expert archaeologist, I'm talking about Matt, but he's also a really good presenter. Sickeningly. Helen, tell me about what finds we've come up with so far this time.
So far from the topsoil, it has mainly been flint. So you can see the range here, cores, flakes, etc. And this enigmatic stuff the burnt flint, that we still don't really know what it was. We've got more work to do on that. We've also got some metal work from the metal detector survey, not just in the trench, but also around the rest of the field. We have some interesting results from that. It looks interesting. It needs more work, and so I'm going to remain tight-lipped for a bit. But what we're expecting to find, well, it includes there's lots of other things that we might be expecting to find, aren't there, Jackie?
I mean, just mentioning the burnt flint again. Of course, one of the things that could have come from is the pyre sites, because we know that the cremations themselves are taking place here. But what we are hoping to find, and we haven't done yet, is cremated bone. That's what it looks like. That isn't actually from here. That's from another Anglo-Saxon site further north. But you can see you've got the compact bone, bits of long bone, skull bone, and then the bits of trabecular bone, this sort of open, spongy bone work. So, yeah, with any luck, we're going to find some of that.
Yes, because that survives so much better in this acid soil. If it's being disturbed, then we'd never find evidence of a disturbed inhumation burial in terms of the skeletal remains. It would just go to mush.
But we're not just talking about the Anglo-Saxon period. Presumably, we could find stuff both from before and after.
Well, that's the thing. That's one of the things that makes these pieces of burnt flint so wretchedly difficult, because these flints have come from the later prehistoric period.
When you say later prehistoric, that's what we call the Neolithic?
No, it's incredibly long. It means we don't know. It's not Paleolithic, it's not Mesolithic. It could be Neolithic, Bronze Age, even early Iron Age. That gives us thousands of years.
Yeah. And of course, one of the things with the Bronze Age is we mustn't forget that one of the burials that we found under the visitor centre was a Middle Bronze Age cremation burial. That's why the Saxon cemetery was placed here.
So is that this thing of sort of respecting a place because of its previous use? That even though it was hundreds of years previously when the Bronze Age people were here, the Anglo-Saxons went, oh, this is holy, so we will bury our people
because
here.
Because it's under a mound,
Yeah.
they could see it.
Yeah, they would recognise that this was somewhere that people were previously, and it's almost like a claim on the land, and they think, right, OK, this is a ritual landscape, this is important. We're going to claim this now by burying our dead here.
I guess we still do that kind of thing, don't we? You know, our kings and queens go to Westminster Cathedral because that's where people were buried 100,000 years previously.
Not sure about all of the details of that, Tony, but never mind. But to go back to this piece of burnt flint, though, you see, Jackie says it could have come from a cremation pyre and be Anglo-Saxon. But we can't tell whether this one's Anglo-Saxon or whether it could be as old as Neolithic, because the oldest features on the site of Sutton Hoo are Neolithic, as old as 3,600 BC, so that's like 5,600 years ago, and they contain burnt flint. These funny little pits that might be tree throws or might be deliberate, they're filled with pottery of that date and these burnt flints. So these could be literally of any age. So that's the Neolithic. Then into the early Bronze Age, we've got huge ditches, absolutely massive ditches that push across country, taking no account of any topography or apparently, you know, it looks like nobody really owns the land. It's all being divided up for new ownership. These are enormous and would have taken a lot of work. So someone's controlling a lot of resources. That's the early Bronze Age, so 2000 BC. Then we come onto the Middle Bronze Age and we have the burial here. And then towards the late Bronze Age, early Iron Age, we have a settlement down on the Mound Cemetery that we can only see because it's been protected by the mounds. So the buried soil has not blown away, it's been protected by the mound. Then moving on into the Iron Age, we have these little tiny ditches that have the mounds placed over them, which is a very interesting idea. So the Anglo-Saxons would have seen this palimpsest of earthworks that hadn't been ploughed out completely. They would have known that they were there and they would have recognised this as an ancient landscape.
And there's the name of the place itself, isn't there? Sutton Hoo, Southtown Hook or Southtown Peninsula or whatever.
South of what?
Yeah,
what was the important place
absolutely.
it was south of? Yes, quite. And so we can see right up to the Iron Age, and then we jump to the 6th century with the Tranmere House Cemetery, and then we're safely into the Mound Cemetery period where, you know, the rest is history. We know what happens there.
There's one find that we haven't actually talked about at all yet, which is very exciting, which is the Bromswell bucket. A great find, what the kind of thing all archaeologists actually love to find. And Angela Kerr-Evans has been having a look at it for us.
So this is the actual Bromswell bucket.
Yeah.
It was found in Garden Field in 1986 on the end of a harrow.
Yeah.
And this is the reconstruction
Yes.
of the whole thing,
Yeah.
with its base, with a complete handle in
Yeah.
place, and the brassy, shiny
yeah.
colour.
Yes, it would be interesting to know to what extent it would have been quite so brassy by the time it reached here and it, you know, put in the grave.
Every time I see it, I'm astounded at how big it is. In my
Yes.
memory, it shrinks down to the size of a more normal Anglo-Saxon bucket, but it's much bigger, isn't it?
It is quite big, and yet it's really fragile when you look at the thickness of the walls of it. I mean,
Yes, paper thin,
it's
really.
paper thin.
Yes.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, the thing about it is that the punch work is so delicate, and you've got this tiny annular punch picking out details, and then you have this almost free-form inscribed bodywork, so that the bodies almost seem to be moving.
Yes.
And the animals are so exciting
Alive.
as well. They're
Yes,
very alive.
energetic.
Yeah.
So I can see one of the animals here.
Yeah.
You can just see its paws, and then it's looking back over its shoulder.
Shoulder.
The figures, with that kind of, the way they've done the hair,
Yeah.
looks almost African.
Oh, absolutely.
So
yes, absolutely.
are these figures supposed to be barbarians, like the English were to the Romans and the Greeks, or are they supposed to be
exotic?
Or are they supposed to be just ordinary members of the Roman Empire?
Yeah. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yes.
One of the things that we do know, we might not know exactly where it was made, might not know how it made its way to Britain, but I gather from the inscription that we do know that it's 6th century because of the letter forms.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I'm particularly interested in this handle though, because
Yeah.
it's missing one end.
It's missing one end, and it's very heavy.
Yes.
It's a very heavy piece of bronze, and it makes me wonder whether it could be a replacement. It does have quite a bit of wear on it, but you know, the actual handle fixings, the one that survives anyway,
Flimsy.
It's very flimsy, and
that break is really fresh.
yeah.
The rest
Yeah.
of that handle is somewhere out
Yeah,
there.
it
And
could be.
while I'm not sure that the bottom would survive to be found, I'm pretty sure
A
that
piece of
other
the
end
handle
would.
should survive, and it would be very identifiable too.
Yes.
You couldn't miss that.
Jackie, you've seen this bucket in real life or not?
I have, yes. I went round the museum and had a look at it.
Oh, good, so you're well briefed.
Jolly nice as well.
The museum
Lovely.
here, which if anyone hasn't been here, must go to it. It's got some great finds, hasn't
And
it?
some fantastic reconstructions as well, which is an important thing, because it's sometimes hard when you've only got part of something to envisage what the whole of it will look like.
And what was
It's a
your reaction?
reconstructed bucket, actually. You can see it shining in all this brassy gorgeousness, the reconstruction.
Yes. And it is. It's a splendid item, absolutely splendid item, and obviously very, very high status. There aren't, if I believe, I mean, I'm sure Helen will tell you better than I, there are very few of these around, and it's most likely to have come from a grave. What we don't know is whether it would have been an inhumation grave or a cremation grave, because of course we don't have its context. So, you know, there's always hope.
Yeah, I mean, it is an extraordinary thing, and there's only really 3 that we know that have come from probable burials or certain burials in England. And they've all got these hunting scenes around them and an inscription around the top. And our inscription says, I wrote it down, it says, in good health, use this, my lord, for many good years. Now, it would be nice if it had a name or an actual use, but people have pointed out that because it says in good health, maybe it was for use in a bath where you are, or baths perhaps we should say, Roman baths, where it is, you're washing for healthful reasons. And one of the best stories that proves, I think, that buckets were used in baths is that in the 7th century, in 668, there was an emperor in the Eastern Empire called Constans, and he was killed while he was in the baths by being whacked over the head with a bucket.
perfect evidence that they were in use. So is what we're saying that someone was buried here and this old thing, this old beautiful thing that had been lying around was used? Would that have been the thinking?
I don't know. It's either that there was an old beautiful thing which for some reason was put in a grave then and then wouldn't have been available to be used or on display or anything else after that, or it was something that had arrived more recently, because although we can tell from the design, from the detail of the lettering, that it was made in the 6th century in the Eastern Mediterranean, so maybe Syria, maybe Egypt, maybe Turkey, modern Turkey. They're only ever buried rather later when they come to England. Yeah. So they are maybe imported with all that significance that they've got of civilization, and this inscription is in Greek, and the hunting scene is full of, it's got a lion and it's got a lioness or maybe a leopard or something. It's exotic. Yeah. It's not just another piece of Anglo-Saxon stuff. It's something redolent of the Roman power that Byzantium now is.
Talking about Roman, I know this is going to sound a little bit Monty Python, but we haven't mentioned the Romans, or hardly at all. Presumably, we could be finding Roman stuff on this site.
Well, we might, but we haven't really found any or very much Roman stuff until now. Over in the corner of Gardenfield was a bit of a spread of pottery. And we're hoping that more may come up to explain this gap between the Iron Age and the 6th century, really. It's a long way, and it means that our continuity, which it would be nice to have to explain things, we've got this big black hole in the middle of it.
Of course, it's not unknown for the Romans to also have made burials in the same area as Bronze Age barrows. It does happen. It's not as common as it is in the Anglo-Saxon period.
So we could find a Roman.
But it does, but you never know. Wow. You never know.
All of this tantalising stuff, and we haven't found very much yet, but then you wouldn't expect us to yet, but we're going to be digging until towards the end of June, aren't we? So by that time, all the things that you've been waving seductively at us for the last half hour or so will or will not have become a reality. So do stay with us. This dig has been funded by Patreon, by all the people who've joined Patreon, by the people who are raising questions on Patreon and giving us their money. So if you want us to continue to be able to dig either here or elsewhere, please do subscribe. We've had a great time over the last half hour, 3/4, whatever it's been. It's flown by for me anyway. I hope it has for you too. And if you've enjoyed it, please watch us again. Bye.